Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is week 2 of VMLMTG. I am Nicole Callahan, also known as Lady of the Crease, and it is my honor and pleasure to not introduce, because if you've been here before, you know her well. I have with me Arya Karamchandani, also known as Hogpog, also known as the person who just wins everything, our Season 4 VML champion, our one-shot historic champion, and now a permanent fixture on VML production. Hello and welcome.
The honor's all mine, Nicole. It's a pleasure to be casting with you.
You flatter me. You flatter me. And if you haven't been here before, welcome. We are the VML. We put the spotlight on people of marginalized genders within the Magic community. So we have 64 of these fantastic players. We have divvied them up into 8 different divisions, and we do 7 weeks of round robin play. Then we cut to a playoff to the top 24, down the top 16, top 8, 4, 2, and then we have one at the top. And we've got a nice size prize pool, including that one at the top going to a future set championship. So big thanks to Wizards for that. Thank you to Channel Fireball for the support, and a big thank you to NRG Series for making this possible. Let's take a look at the prize breakdown there. It's a $3,500 prize pool. A lot of money. A lot of awesome stuff. We got Channel Fireball Pro going to our top 8, 1 month for the top 8, 1 year for the first place. But top 16, splitting up that $3,500 in cash. And a new addition this season, you get 500 gems per group stage match win. So that's pretty sweet. So even if you like squeak out, you're like, I lost in top 24, that kind of stinks. You get 500 gems on your arena account to get ready for next season. Ooh. Maybe a little too early to talk about that, but it's a good thing. So we've got some great matchups here for you tonight. Looking forward to diving right in here. We are starting with the metagame breakdown here, and it's a little overwhelming. I don't know. Arya, you see any pattern here? Anything?
Izzet decks seem to be pretty popular.
Yes. Is it dominating the format? We have combined Izzet Epiphany, straight Epiphany decks with the Izzet Dragon decks to kind of make that pizza pie look a little more skewed, I suppose. But right behind that, we have 11 mono green aggro decks this week, 5 treasures decks, 5 mono white aggro decks, and then a smattering of 15 other decks here. What are your thoughts on the most popular decks here? What do you see going up and down over the next couple of weeks now that we're getting into a new standard? Do you think any of these are going to still be players over the next couple of weeks, or do you think this is just going to change?
I think we're gonna see similar decks to these for a while still. As it stands, Izzet is completely defining the format, with not only the most played deck being Izzet, but also the next most played decks all being aggressive decks that have some ability to beat Izzet before it starts taking extra turns, and with mid-range decks being basically non-existent in this format. And the aggressive decks are getting a bunch of new tools from the new set from Crimson Vow, so I wouldn't be surprised to see a slight uptick in those. And it remains to be seen whether Izzet Epiphany will continue to have the tools to beat them.
Yes, we thank you to all of you who are joining us here tonight on this pre-release weekend. I guess some of you could be watching on your phone from your LGS right now or something, but Crimson Vow, it's the big weekend, the honeymoon weekend, as it were, right? All right, so let's check out our first matchup here. We are heading over to division number 6. We have Jade Duong on one of those Izzet decks. We've got Izzet Dragons just kicking it right off with one of the most powerful decks in the format here. Any thoughts on this list in particular?
I suppose the most interesting aspect of this list would be the 3 copies of Alrund's Epiphany rather than the full 4, recognizing that the Dragons deck, unlike the Turns deck, is a little less all in on that card, and it's more about just getting ahead with Smoldering Eggs and Goldspan Dragons. A notable difference in play pattern between the two decks is that with the Dragons deck, if you take a single extra turn with Smoldering Egg or Goldspan Dragon in play, that's often sufficient to win the game. Whereas the non-Dragons builds of turns will need to take several extra turns to win the game. So that means the full 4 copies of Alan's Epiphany are absolutely necessary.
That makes a lot of sense. It's funny because it was one of those things where you looked at the picture and I had to look at it a couple of seconds. I was like, am I really only counting 3? Because sometimes they just like put a random copy of a card in like the bottom left corner. You can see like the Hall of the Storm Giant. They're separate. And I was like, no, I've got to just be missing it, right? It's got to be here somewhere, and it's just not. So, but so it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. And like you said, we are up against Olivia Dunlap, who is on green-white ramp. So let's see a ramp here. Your Sharn is definitely a card. I've seen that played more in Historic than I have in Standard. So any thoughts on this deck here? Felidar Retreat, anything stand out to you?
Well, we saw a lot of decks like this green-white Storm the Festival decks in particular at the start of the format before Izzet turns kind of took over the late game. Or the mid-range and late game section of decks. And this build is clearly built specifically to have game against Izzet. It's much more low to the ground than green-white decks historically. And those 4 Yasharns are actually secretly very, very good against various Izzet decks because they shut off the treasure abilities from something like Goldspan Dragon or Unexpected Windfall.
Oh, see, I didn't even think of that. That sacrificing, it comes up, and playing the full 4 Yasharns too. So really, really wanting to find that card in this matchup. So let's see how this pans out as we head in. This is Division 6, a Jade Duong versus Olivia Dunlap. We will be watching from the side of Jade, whose opener here. You have all your colors, a little bit of removal. 2 of the 3 all runs Epiphany, and it looks like it's going to be a keep, island, and a pass of the turn. What are your thoughts on this opener?
Yeah, it's not the most exciting opener, but in a matchup like this for Izzet, all that really matters is making sure you have a decent early game. And with a Thundering Rebuke and a Fading Hope to make sure you really just can't fall behind in the early game, I think I'm fairly happy with the stand, even if it is a little risky in terms of potentially not being able to hit land drops.
Yes, and Expressive Iteration, though, seems to be a pretty good draw, as Jade does also draw running lands, and we'll see the 3 cards off of this iteration: a Shatterskull Smashing, a Dissipate, and a Dragon's Fire. The Dissipate is a 1-of in the deck. It looks like Dragon's Fire will go to hands. No interest in keeping the Dissipate at all. Would rather just exile it than have it be an option even later on. Going to reveal it, play Hall of the Storm Giants, and pass the turn back.
Yeah, unfortunately, I suspect probably a product of the slightly unintuitive wording on Expressive Iteration, where the cards you keep are the first and third cards and not the second. So Jade was denied the opportunity to play a Shatterskull Smashing as a land there, unfortunately.
Yes, these things happen. It's templating of those cards. That's all right. We'll see. Olivia has played an Asika's Chariot here. A little bit difficult for Jade to deal with her current hand, and no land drop is kind of awkward here as well. Has Divide by 0 and Fading Hope up, as well as removal spells and Thundering Rebuke and Dragon's Fire. But it's going to pass the turn and see what happens on Olivia's side. Curse of Silence, the draw on that side. A card that I feel may have been a bit underwhelming in a lot of lists. It is only a 1-of in Olivia's deck. What do you think about that card?
Yeah, it's unusual in Standard, certainly, but it's something that really benefits from the open decklist format of the VML. While it's not the most popular choice on ladder, because particularly game 1, you have no idea what you're going to be, what the exact list you're playing against is. In a format like VML, where there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be on decks like Izzet week after week, and those decks are super reliant on a single specific card. It's a card that you know what's in your opponent's deck, so you can name something like Elrond's Epiphany, and there's not really a chance of missing like there would be on ladder.
All right, so that's really good. That's a very good point, that the open deck list that we have here at the VML, the deck lists are published weekly, and they do change weekly if you would like them to. We're going to see a divide by 0, bouncing that chariot back to hand for Olivia after it copies that kitty cat token. And so Prosperous Innkeeper going to get in for 1. Jade down to 18. Olivia at 23 life. And down comes that Curse of Silence. Enchanting Jade. We'll see what the name will be here. Goldspan Dragon is the name on Olivia's side on that Curse of Silence, followed by a Tangleflora Hydron. And what do you know? It's almost like she knew.
Yeah, one of the things you'll see with the Izzet deck against other creature decks rather than with the Dragons deck against other creature decks rather than the Epiphany decks as well, the Epiphany decks may sometimes struggle to have a way to go really over the top in the mid game until they start taking extra turns. Dragons does have the ability to play specifically Goldspan Dragon, and there's not a lot of answers to that out of a deck like Green-White. So having the ability to Curse of Silence here, prevent that being an out for Jade is really, really strong for Olivia and puts them in a pretty great spot here.
Yeah, I see that. As Olivia gets in with the 3 cats and the Prosperous Innkeeper and is going to cast Field Trip, as Jade took care of that Tangleflora Hedron, so it could not produce the mana, because we see Olivia getting stuck on the 3 lands, able to get an Environmental Sciences here, get a land off of that Field Trip. So will no longer be squeezed on mana, most likely, but Jade is still at 13 and is getting closer, much closer to being able to just chain those epiphanies together. And we'll see a Memory Deluge kind of help that along here. We see another Hall of Storm Giants, a Mountain, a Smoldering Egg, and a Negate. Looks like Mountain is definitely going to go in the hands. It looks like just going to take both lands here, going to play the tap land and kind of just brace herself for this hit right here, knowing that probably going to take a little bit more damage, let the shields down for another turn. And we'll see what Olivia decides to do with a grip full, 7 cards, all 7 spells. So it's a big, important turn. This is definitely a pivotal turn in this match, and it looks like the Chariot will be replayed, make a couple more 2/2s, and get in for 7 once more, bringing Jade down to 6. Prismari command the draw for turn, and Mountain will get played. And the pause. I'm not sure the thought process here.
Yeah, so in this spot, and here we're going to see this Curse of Silence on Goldspan Dragon put in a lot of work, because yes, Jade can take an extra turn with Auron's Epiphany, possibly even multiple extra turns with Auron's Epiphany, but without any Galvanic iterations in the deck to really maybe chain extra turns beyond what's normally reasonable, this Izzet Dragon's deck is really reliant on having a Smoldering Egg or Goldspan Dragon in play to actually start getting some sort of advantage off of all those extra turns. And with the Dragon costing 2 extra mana thanks to the Curse of Silence, this extra turn's really just making 2 birds and drawing another card and doing nothing else.
Yeah, and unfortunately that other card was a second Goldspan Dragon. I'm going to say props to Olivia, because if Curse of Silence was in my deck and I was playing against an Epiphany deck, I just like slam name Allrun's Epiphany every time, and it's definitely not the right move here. So kudos to Olivia for knowing the matchup, and I would say in this case, naming the correct card.
Yeah, it's a really heads up play too, because the initial instinct to name Epiphany, while tempting, probably doesn't actually work out in the long run against Goldspan Dragon specifically, because against something like Izzet Epiphany, sure, they're going to have trouble getting to that 10, 12 mana to play to play an Epiphany and copy it. But against a deck like Izzet Dragons, if there's a Goldspan Dragon that's just going for several turns, it doesn't matter how much mana you're going to make the Epiphanies cost, because the Goldspan Dragons are just going to generate enough to be able to cast it through any number of Curses of Silence.
I found that very interesting here. Casting Prismari command, destroying the target artifact in the Chariot, but dealing 2 to the Innkeeper over the cats. Is this trying to perhaps stem like the life gain that's happening on Olivia's side, or why kill that over a cat? I suppose.
I'm not entirely sure, but it's entirely possible that it is a result of life gain. The 2/2s and the 1/1s are not hugely different creature sizes here. And what this does is it makes it more likely that on a future set of turns, Jade will be able to just chain a bunch of extra turns and get enough value with gold, get enough damage with Auron's Epiphany and Goldspan Dragons to avoid to be able to get in lethal without Olivia taking an extra turn. And every point of life in a spot like that matters with the Innkeeper, because unlike Izzet Epiphany, this deck can't just take 7-8 turns in a row, so every point of damage does very much matter.
All right, this is wonderful. So we're seeing heads up plays from both sides here. Very intricate matchup, it seems. And it looks like playing the 7th land after keeping it on top with that Fading Hope Scry, thinking about what to do here, kind of sizing up her cards. Olivia tapped out at the moment, but at a pretty harrowing 26 life, and Jade only at 4. It looks like Memory Deluge is going to be the play here, and it's revealing 2 lands, another Goldspan Dragon, and another Memory Deluge, and that is enough. So Jade's going to say, let's move on to game number 2. We'll take a look at sideboards here. On Jade's side, we have 1 Fading Hope, 3 Burning Hands, 2 Cinderclasm, an Environmental Science, 4 Malevolent Hermit, 1 Test of Talents, 1 Heated Debate, 1 Prismari Command, and 1 Mascot Exhibition. What do we see coming in and going out here?
Well, we're going to see some of the card draw come out, definitely. We're seeing the Deluges come out, Deluges expressive iterations get trimmed, and there's going to be just more efficient interaction. So Dissipate also got cut as a counterspell that's somewhat clunky against cheap threats. Meanwhile, something like Prismari Command can kill a Chariot and a token, something like the Cinderclasms can wipe up an entire board of tokens, like we saw at the end of the game there. So there's really just going to be a move towards more efficient removal in a spot like this that lines up better against the threats out of the green-white deck.
Oh, I love that. And we see some moving around, thinking, adding, and removing, and then we'll move on to Olivia's sideboard here. We have 3 Portable Hold, 2 Environmental Sciences, 1 Kabira Takedown, 1 Outland Liberator, 2 Borrowed Time, 2 Containment Breach, 1 Reduced to Memory, 2 Toski, and a Mascot Exhibition. What are we thinking on this side of the table?
So there's really a lot of options in this spot for the green-white deck. A lot of cards are good but not fantastic, or awkward in certain spots. Portable Hole is very good when it's killing a Smoldering Egg, but completely unplayable any other time. Toski is excellent for the most part because it can't be countered out of the Dragon's deck and gets a lot of card advantage, but it's very awkward against something like Fading Hope or Divide by Zero. It just trades down on mana. And yes, there's not uniformly good cards. It's just a matter of prioritizing what you think, what angle you want to fight the blue-red deck on, and where you're best positioned to do that.
Yeah, and it looks like shaving a little here, like shaving a single Felidar Retreat for a Toski, then kind of like diversifying her threats, I think, is what Olivia looked to be doing. Boil Snarl will start us off. I can't say that word. On Jade's side. And we're off to the races. We'll see a forest from Olivia as both players kept 7. A mountain and going to foretell the Saw It coming. With Dragon's Fire and Prismari Command both in hand. Cave of the Frost Dragon and Prosperous Innkeeper is back, making a treasure. Alrund's Epiphany the draw now on Jade's side. We'll see. Thinking about playing that island, and that will come down, considering the Prismari Command to kill that treasure and that Innkeeper. And it looks like, oh, no, we're going to make a treasure token and kill the Innkeeper.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty heads-up play again from Jade, recognizing that the mana on Olivia's side is a lot less important than the mana on Jade's side, just because Jade's going to be doing things like casting Alrund's Epiphany, so that 1 extra mana and getting to cast something like Epiphany 1 turn earlier might end up being really, really important. And on top of that, the fact that a Goldspan Dragon in the future might make that 1 treasure produce 2 extra mana makes getting a treasure off that Prismari Command definitely worth it.
Yes. And we'll see a foretold all runs Epiphany and a pass back of the turn. And Olivia drawing another Prosperous Innkeeper here. So again, a full grip, 6 cards, all spells. Prosperous Innkeeper going to be the play. But is this enough to draw out the Saw It Coming? It will be. So Jade looking to fight over this Innkeeper.
Yeah, and it's an awkward spot for Jade, definitely, because Jade's kind of priced into using the sword coming in that spot. You don't want your mana to be wasted, and Dragon's Fire can't kill the Essica's Chariot. But at the same time, Prosperous Innkeeper is not exactly the ideal target for that.
We see Smoldering Egg the draw here, though, on reading Dragon's Fire. Let's see. And then a couple lands, and that all runs Epiphany, just kind of waiting in the wings. Looking like maybe wanting to save that one to flip the Smoldering Egg into Ashmouth Dragon.
Yeah, Egg likely one of the better draws in Jade's deck in that spot. Just allowing Jade to potentially next turn cast an Auron's Epiphany and flip the Smoldering Egg, and that's definitely a line to just let her get ahead in the long game, because there's not much the green white deck can really do to keep up with the flipped egg.
Oh, that makes sense. And now we know that there's double Redain in Olivia's hand right now. We'll see one of them come down. We'll see how long this Dragon's Fire is going to stay in Jade's hand. So that will resolve. That would make Auron's Epiphany pretty expensive. Gonna crew with that Redain. Let that happen. So we've got 2 kitty tokens and the Chariot. Looking like everybody's coming in. Making a copy. Oh, God.
That Dragon's Fire really providing a lot of value here for Jade. In this spot, if that Redain sticks around and prevents her from casting extra turns, she doesn't really have much by ways of lines to victory. But without that being the case, with the Dragon's Fire to kill the Redain, and also put 2 counters on the egg, the Auron's Epiphany will flip the egg, and then she'll get a turn with an egg in play and all her mana. And that might be enough to get ahead this game.
Yeah, and Jade still definitely needs a little bit of help. Has been drowning a little bit in the lands, and also just having 1 land in hand, 1 card versus Olivia's 4. So, another land the draw here. And this is going to be a close one.
Yeah, definitely not ideal. Jade has the potential to get really far ahead here with a drawn spell, but with having drawn back-to-back lands there's really not much that can be done, because, well, the Ashmouth Dragon, very scary threat with spells, but does not help mitigate Flood in any way.
Yes. Well, we see Jade knows writing's on the wall, so attacking 4-6, going to bring Olivia down to 10. We have both players at 10 life right now. It's a scary spot to be in. Olivia's last couple of lands have come and tapped, and Jade knows that she's a little choked on mana at the moment. But both Yusharn and Loyal Warhound would be able to help with that.
Yeah, and even though Jade is in this spot, leaving herself dead to a creature to crew the Essica's Chariot, it's just a choice it's just an option that she doesn't have much of a choice but to go for. Making sure to get Olivia to 10 in this spot allows Jade to next turn potentially chain 2 spells off of a card draw spell and just have lethal. So she kind of has to go for the aggressive line and hope Olivia doesn't have anything.
Yes, but unfortunately, we have perfect knowledge. We knew that Olivia had that Yusharn in hand, was able to crew that Chariot, and will take down this match here in week 2 of the VML. So good games to both of our players, both to Olivia Dunlap and Jade Duong, but Olivia's going to take this one down out of Division 6.
And that was an excellent example of how the deck has really had to pivot to try and combat these blue-red decks. We saw the one copy of Storm the Festival in Olivia's hand at the end of the game, but there's really just only the one copy in the deck as opposed to 3 or 4 that used to be in earlier versions of the deck. And it's really just a nod to these Izzet Epiphany decks and recognizing that in this matchup, you're playing the role of the aggressor, so you need to be able to deploy threats early rather than have impactful 6 drops.
Oh, for sure. Yes, we saw that cut down to 1 and playing the For Sharn instead. But yes, good games to both of our players. We can move on to our next matchup now, which comes out of Division 2. We have a Looter Scooter, our Izzet player for this round. Also on Team Werewolf, our last matchup was a vampire on vampire matchup. This round we have a werewolf on a werewolf. So, but we take a look at the Is it Epiphany? It isn't the Is it Dragons deck, but playing a lot of Smoldering Eggs in the main deck.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got the 4 Smoldering Eggs in the main, a lot of removal. I noticed they always like to play like 1 or 2 Demon Bolts, like 1 or 2 just like kind of like breaking up maybe to avoid like a test of talents or something like that to kind of diversify the removal here. Do you have any thoughts on this list?
Yeah, so you mentioned seeing a diversity in removal spells, and definitely that's something this deck is really incentivized to do just because it sees so many cards. So you're incentivized to break up your removal spells so that you can dig for the particular one that's impactful in any given matchup. Luta's deck is notably somewhere between the Dragons decks and the Epiphany decks, with the 4 main decks Smoldering Eggs, just giving her enough threats to, again, not have to run the full 4 Alrund's Epiphanies. She only has 3 in her deck. But at the same time, doesn't have the Goldspan Dragons, which can be expensive and clunky threats in some matchup. And instead is lower to the ground with her threats and has a solid plan to interact a lot in the mid-game.
Yes, and I see Looter also mentioned looking forward to Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, and I'm actually kind of looking forward to that card coming out of Crimson Vow. Wonder what kind of number it's going to do for the white weenie decks and everything going forward, as they already had things like Redeem. But so also one that I am very excited about myself. And now let's take a look at the other side. Speaking of being excited, we have Koby Haigerty here with green white Magecraft, Celestia Magecraft deck. I had first seen this deck personally from actually a former VML competitor, Aaron Barrett. She had I don't know if she was the originator of this list, but I absolutely love it. She tends to play a lot of like all-in aggro decks like Infect and a lot of mono red and things like that. And this deck, I am just all about it. I am all about just making like my Clever Luminancer like, you know, a 10-11 and attacking, holding up a Snakeskin Veil, which I think is actually the most important card in this matchup, the Snakeskin Veil, not the Clever Luminancer. But it's in a world of fading hopes and demon bolts, I feel like you got a lot of, you know, you got to have guts to register an all-in on one creature deck. So this is a pretty crazy list, and I love every bit of it. So do you have any thoughts on it?
I think that against Izzet Epiphany might actually be this deck's place to shine. One of the main issues with the Magecraft decks is they're a little weak against other aggressive decks just because of how bad they are on the defensive. We see Koby mentioning Essica's Chariot being a hard card for this deck to deal with, just because this deck doesn't have a lot of good answers, and once it falls behind, Lumimancers and such with things like Guiding Voice are really not good on defense. But against a deck like Izzet Epiphany, this deck has the potential to be more explosive than almost any deck in Standard, and may have a good chance of just running over the Epiphany deck before it gets to the late game.
Yes. So Koby Haigerty not wanting to see a Essica's Chariot from their opponent, and luckily we'll get their wish here. We'll take a look at this matchup starting right now, and we'll be on the side of Looter Scooter here, our Izzet Epiphany player, and Koby will be at the top of the screen. We'll see a hand here. Jawari Disruption, Divide by Zero, Allrun's Epiphany, Demon Bolt, and 3 lands. Seems pretty good to me.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on the opener?
With hands like this, the Izzet deck often ends up really, really leaning on Jawari Disruption. This isn't a matchup where you can afford to do nothing for the first 2 turns of the game, but with Disruption on 2 as a fast spike basically being a counterspell, this hand ends up looking pretty serviceable because you have interaction for whatever's played on 2, and then once you get to 3 with the Demon Bolt and Divide by Zero, just try and interact for every turn for the rest of the game.
Yes, and it definitely might be a little suspicious just playing your second land and saying, okay, it's your turn now. We'll see Monk of the Open Hand first spell. And with this low curve, you better believe that there definitely can be multiple 1-drops, and we will see that. And Guiding Voice will be cast on the Clever Luminancer, so a couple triggers will go off. Monk of the Open Hand will still get his counter, and Clever Luminancer will go up to a 2/3, and we'll get in here, bringing Looter Scooter down to 18. Hall of Storm Giants, the draw here. Field of Ruin will be the play, and a pass back of the turn. Double Demon Bolt up. Seems pretty good here.
Yeah, though the turn 2 for Koby was kind of the nightmare scenario for Ludo, given the hand that Ludo has. In this spot, what Ludo was really, really hoping for was something like this Light Scribe on 2, something that could be countered with Disruption, and avoiding Koby being able to deploy more to the board. As it turned out, yes, Ludo did get to counter one Koby's spell, but in this spot, Koby still deployed another threat, and this turn is going to be playing 2 spells again, and Ludo's probably only going to be able to interact with one of them, and that leaves them relatively far ahead in this spot.
Oh, but very interestingly, it's just a second Clever Luminancer. It's not like a pump spell or a pump the team or anything like that. No counters are going to be added. Just the one counter on the Monk of the Open Hand, which will leave the other Clever Luminancer, the unsummoning second one, still just an 0-1. We'll see Demon Bolt taking care of that 3/3 Monk, and nothing really to attack with from Koby's side now. So they'll just pass the turn, and looks like just going to cast a Demon Bolt and just take care of that Light Scribe while Koby was tapped out. And Behold the Multiverse, All Runs Epiphany, and Divide by Zero all still waiting in the hands. A fourth land on Koby's side. I'm sure that's more lands than Koby normally would like to see, but Mavinda's Student's Advocate will be the play. A 2/3 flyer you can pay 0 to cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. If that spell doesn't target a creature you control, it costs more to cast. So, and I think you can do it only once per turn.
Yep.
So,
and
okay,
again,
a lot of words on that card.
we're seeing a lot of really disciplined plays from Koby in this spot. Koby could very well have gone for some sort of spell last turn rather than running out that second Lumimancer to try and get in more damage. But recognizing at this point that what Ludoscuta is really restrained on is mana, just the ability to with all of their interaction spells being relatively expensive, the ability to interact with multiple things in the same turn isn't really not something that they had. So recognizing that that's the issue and trying to take advantage of that by deploying multiple cheap threats rather than getting in damage has put Koby pretty far ahead in this spot.
No, and it looks like it. Even after that turn that seemed a bit underwhelming, where Koby wasn't even able to attack, but Looter Scooter still is at 13 life here. So not a very high life total. And like you said, just stuck on land. So gonna foretell that Behold the Multiverse and just pass the turn back after playing the Smoldering Egg, hoping to kind of gum up the battlefield a little bit here. But those Clever Luminancers can get out of control real quick. So we'll see what we have from Koby's side.
Yeah, with the 2 Lumimancers and the Probation in hand, something like a Snakeskin Veil, or really any 1-mana green spell, would probably be lethal in this spot, just allowing Koby to cast 3 spells in a turn, prevent the Smoldering Egg from blocking, and just getting for enough damage. So Ludo really has to hope there's just no spells in Koby's hand.
And a Dragon's Guard Elite will be the first play. Blizzard Brawl. And that's just triggering everything. So Dragon's Guard Elite, a little bit bigger. Clever Lumimancer, a little bit bigger, both of them. And this is an attack for 8 here, bringing Looter Scooter down to 5. And a good amount of diversified threats. All runs Epiphany, the draw for turn. Question is, I don't think that actually, like, I don't think that Looter can survive another turn, even with that divide by 0. And Looter sees that too. So we're just going to move to sideboards, move on to game number 2, and see what we've got here on Looter's side. Sideboard is a Cathartic Pyre, 4 Disdainful Stroke, an Environmental Sciences, 2 Tested Talents, 2 Heated Debates, 1 Teachings, 1 All Runs Epiphany, 2 Cyclone Summoner, and a Mascot Exhibition. Obviously ignoring the lessons. What do you think we're going to see here?
Yeah, unfortunately for Looter in this matchup, she really doesn't have the tools to fight what Koby is doing. Koby is just really low to the ground, has really cheap threats, and Looter's going to be bringing a bunch of 1-for-1 interaction, taking out the Elrond's Epiphanies and playing as more of a controlling deck. But the problem is that without efficient interaction in the sideboard, with all the interaction in the sideboard being 2 and 3 mana answers to Koby's 1 and 2 mana threats, Looter's still not in great shape going into game 2 because she's still very likely to just get run over.
Yes, and we see this opener here: 3 lands, a Galvanic Iteration, Jawari Disruption, a Test of Talents, and a Smoldering Egg. Gonna say that's not good enough, so gonna throw back and get almost an identical hand here, switching out Behold the Multiverse for the what was it, an Epiphany or something? It was almost very, very similar. So gonna ship back that Test of Talents, but keeping 6. Hoping that Jawari Disruption can do some work here, get some value, and that Smoldering Egg can kind of like calm down any ground attacks that would happen on Koby's side. Gonna play the Snarl and reveal an island.
You mentioned Epiphany, and while I'm fairly certain the hand didn't have that, we saw what has become a pretty common tactic for these Epiphany decks post-spot against white decks, particularly decks with Ordain, which is actually completely getting rid of Elrond's Epiphany and the combo package, with the idea being that post-spot, the deck is just going to play as a control deck with things like Smoldering Eggs and a bunch of card draw, and just attempt to 1-for-1 the opposing white decks out of the game rather than try and win by taking a bunch of extra turns.
Can I tell you, it's actually just a quick, as a Magic player, a lot of times once I've decided I'm going to mulligan a hand, I wipe it from my memory because because you ever like you go, you know, I'm going to mulligan this, and you look at your 6, you're like, oh god, I should have kept my 7. I try to like actively not remember what was in it, so I don't feel so bad. But as a commentator, it's probably a bad thing to do, and I should probably try to remember. But I knew that the hands were almost identical. I just didn't know exactly.
Yeah,
what was that 7th card?
That's actually a good strategy. I should try and do that more.
Yeah, I like it's funny because later then though you also like, you know, I'll talk to my friends and I'll be like, yeah, I shipped back the 7. It was really close, and they'll be, what was it? And I'll be like, I don't remember. So I just try to not get hung up on it in the moment, but that does nothing for me. You know, ultimately, I suppose, for the rest of the day, as we see Koby building up their board here, a Dragon's Guard Elite and a Clever Luminancer, but both players still at 20 life. That Smoldering Egg seems to be holding the fort rather well up to this point. We see Dragon's Guard Elite growing as Clever Lumimancer also grows from that guiding voice. The 1 mana flashback spell. Yep. Oh, sorry, not guiding voice. Homestead Courage, excuse me. The 1 mana flashback spell, putting a +1/+1 counter and giving vigilance. So we'll see that happen and get flashback. Magecraft triggers on Dragon's Guard Elite again, but Heated Debate is going to take care of that Dragon's Guard Elite before it could get any bigger. That's okay, because Clever Lumimancer, big enough here, 5/6, getting into the red zone, bringing Looter down to 15, and drawing a land for turn on Looter's side. Now, Koby, Haigerty, they only have 2 cards left in hand. Could be a very explosive 2 cards, but it is only 2 cards, and that Smoldering Egg is waiting.
Yeah, at this point, with the Behold likely getting cast, I would assume that the Smoldering Egg will be flipping this turn. So Koby needs to close the game out quickly, otherwise the egg with the two cards drawn off of Behold the Multiverse is almost certainly going to take over the game.
Yes, we see now the guiding voice on that Clever Lumimancer, followed by a second Homestead Courage that will grow it even more. We're looking at a 7-8, seeing if that will get flashed back right now. An Academic Probation was the choice of lesson. All right, Clever Lumimancer getting even bigger. We'll see a Behold the Multiverse. Oh, yep. Fake me out there for a second. Behold the Multiverse. And like you said, flipping the dragon. We'll see what the top two are. Another Behold and a Cathartic Pyre. Looks like wanting to draw both. Keeping both on top, drawing both. Academic Probation happening. Choosing a card land name. Opponents can't cast spells with the chosen name until your next turn. We'll see what's named here.
And in this spot, it's really not an ideal situation for Koby, because almost regardless of what they name, Luda's going to have some other answer to deal with Lumimancer, just specifically because of that diversity of answers we discussed earlier when looking at the deck list. So there's going to be something that can kill the Lumimancer here. And at that point, Koby's left with no threats and is pretty unlikely to be able to win this.
Yeah, gonna double down, playing that second, the other Smoldering Egg, and a Cathartic Pyre, enough to kill that large Lumimancer with that extra damage from the Ashmouth Dragon, and now another Smoldering Egg onto, not needing to hold on to that Jawari Disruption anymore. Gonna play it as a land, Behold the Multiverse, and Demon Bolt. Looks like Looter has this one rolled up. So Koby at 16 life, but that could go down pretty quickly at this point. We see Koby sizing up the Smoldering Egg, giving the Smoldering Egg trample till end of turn to draw a card, and it will just be a land, and that's enough. So we're going on to game number 3 between these two players out of Division 2. We have Looter Scooter that we're watching right now on Izzet Epiphany, and Koby Haigerty on Green-White Magecraft. Now, on Koby's side, a few of the cards, because we don't really get to see them sideboard. So they have 3 Redain, God of the Worldly, 4 Mage Duel, Snakeskin Veil, the Academic Probation, Environmental Sciences, Containment Breach, Expanded Anatomy, and Inkling Summoning. So a big lesson package.
Yep.
But so we're really only looking at 4 Mage Duel, 3 Redain, and 2 Snakeskin Veil. Do you see the Snakeskin Veil and the Redains coming in here?
Absolutely. The Snakeskin Veil, of course, key against a deck with this much spot removal. And even with cutting the Epiphanies, all of the card draw in the Izzet deck cost 4 or more, so the Redains can really punish that. And sometimes a Valkmira can also be really powerful in this matchup, just because it does a good job shutting down Smoldering Egg if that's about to flip.
Now, in the other side, there's also 4 Mage Duel in the sideboard, but also 4 Blizzard Brawl in the main. How many fight spells do you want, even though you know your opponent's playing 4 Smoldering Egg? Do you still want those at all, the fight spells? Or is that something that you think comes out here?
I would assume there'd be 4 fight spells at the absolute most. Yeah, something you can definitely lose to in a deck where, like the Green-White Magecraft deck, is just having a bunch of fight spells with the Izzet player not drawing any targets for them and just starting with a bunch of dead cards in hand. So I'd assume that there's not any Mage Duels coming in, and maybe even some of the Snakeskin Veils coming out.
Wow. All right, so we see a rather large Monk of the Open Hand here, 4/4, getting across twice. Looter down to 12, but Looter does have some answers. However, Koby has 3 cards in hand and 3 open mana, so I don't know about what the smart play would be here.
Yeah. At this point for Luda, it's really all about being able to answer that Monk. The Koby has gone down, has not only mulliganed on the play, but has also gone down 1 card to cast that Homestead Courage. So if that 1 Monk is answered, Luda's just so far ahead on cards. It's just a matter of being able to answer it through something like Snakeskin Veil, through some more pump spells to protect it.
Yes, and we can see Looter just needs time, I suppose, is what it would be, with a whole mess of answers in hand, whether before it hits the battlefield in Jawari Disruption or the double Cathartic Pyre or Heated Debate. We'll see if Koby has an answer for this heated debate here. And they do Snakeskin Veil on the Monk of the Open Hand, growing it to a 5/5, protecting it. So maybe not countering the heated debate because that's not allowed, but allowing that monk to live. And Redain will come down on Koby's side. So we will see that sideboard come in here. Homestead Courage, making it a 3/4, and the 6/6 Monk of the Open Hand going to get in, bringing Looter down to 6. So we've got a 6/6 Monk of the Open Hand and a 3/4 Redain. But Galvanic Iteration, and that'll put 2 more counters on that Smoldering Egg. Cathartic Pyre, going to cast that, copy it, and Smoldering Egg will become Ashmouth Dragon. So a 4/4 flyer, sizing up pretty good against that 3/4 flyer.
Yeah, the Homestead Courage in Koby's graveyard is gonna mean that the Redain will be able to outsize the Ashmouth Dragon, but really it's just a matter of not dying this turn for Luda, and then if she untaps with an Ashmouth Dragon and a removal spell, there's really not much chance for Koby to win this game, even with the Redain in play and Luda Scooter being all the way down at 2.
Yeah, we see a divide by 0, the draw here. No untapped land, though, makes things a little bit awkward. But we'll see what Looter decides to do here. Jawari Disruption or the Hall of Storm Giants both can come in as tap lands, Cathartic Pyre, and a divide by 0 to take care of some threats. And it looks like Cathartic Pyre will be the play. So Cathartic Pyre targeting the Redain, and so will the Ashmouth Dragon trigger. Hall of Storm Giants coming in, and Ashmouth Dragon safe to attack. Koby down to 16. Will Looter hang on at 2 life? It's a close one. We see it. Koby tapping some mana here. Jawari Disruption still up for Looter. And a second Redain is coming down.
Yeah, we're gonna see a problem. We've seen a few. We've seen before for this green white deck in the last game as well. Though, is that again? It's like mentioned. It's just not very good at playing from behind. In this spot, Luda is ahead on board, and as long as she keeps answering the threats that Koby plays, which she should be able to do with all the cards she has, then there's not really much of a way for Koby to win this game, because the deck is reliant on having a threat down for a turn and then being able to snowball with spells, and that's not really doable in this spot.
Right. It's it feels a lot like in when you play like Burn and like Legacy. You just hit a point where it's like, if we're in turn 7 or 8, I probably am out of gas. I'm probably not going to win this game. It's just like a matter of time, because at this point Looter is holding an answer in hand, and if untapping, can also iteration and have 2 answers in hand. And it looks like Homestead Courage going to be cast on that Redain. Going to let that happen and flash it back as well. And that one Looter Scooter will respond to divide by 0, target that Redain, trigger some counters on that Smoldering Egg, and trigger some damage from the Ashmouth Dragon. Let's see if Koby's last card in hand can keep that Redain in play. It cannot. So Looter Scooter going to learn, looking at Teachings of the Archaics. Not going to do much. Well, your opponent has two cards in hand. Mascot Exhibition, though, looks to be the play. A land, and then replaying that Redain, I imagine, since not much else that Koby can do at this point. Another divide by 0, the draw. Oh boy.
Yeah, and at this point, just the 2 Ashmouth Dragons are going to be really, really hard for Koby to beat. They're going to be playing from even farther behind, potentially looking at a lethal attack from Luda in the next turn. And the Redain, good at making things cost bar, but not a very good blocker for 4/4 dragons.
Yes, that is for sure. So Loader Scooter just planning out the next turn or two. 2 is still a precarious life total to be at. So making sure, not to lose the game while trying to win the game. So going to be cautious here. Not going to bounce the Redain yet. And just pass the turn. And the third divide by 0. Probably one of the best cards in this matchup. Don't even need that iteration. Just have 2 in hand anyway. So looks like 3 guiding voices have already been, 3 homestead courages have already been cast. And it's just a staring contest at this point. So Looter will pass the turn back to Koby.
Yeah, Looter playing this really patiently because there's really no punishment for her if she does. She's extremely unlikely to lose a long game in a spot like this. Eventually, she'll draw an instant to flip her Smoldering Egg, so she can just afford to take it as slow as she needs to, knowing that eventually she'll flip her second egg and then just be able to kill Koby in a single turn.
Yeah, and it's because it's the amount of mana you pay for the spell, correct? So like an Unexpected Windfall with Redain making it cost 6 would add 6 counters,
yes.
Correct? So that would be pretty sweet. Ooh, and we'll see the Protector Shield, the flip side of Redain getting cast here. And in response, an iteration. Ashmouth Dragon going to go upstairs. So that will ping. Koby will go down to 12. And divide by 0 will be the follow-up. Bouncing that back to hand, flipping everything.
And just recognize, Looter Scooter just recognizing here that even if there's a Snakeskin Veil, it doesn't matter. The Redain's going to be a 3/4, but there's 2 4/4 dragons in play, and those are just going to kill Koby next turn. There's no two ways about it.
And since Teachings of the Archaics, again, doesn't do anything here, since Looter Scooter has quite a few more cards in hand than Koby, they will take the Environmental Sciences instead, untap, and cast the other Divide by 0 in hand, going upstairs with those pings, and there's nothing Koby can do. Looter Scooter very patiently will take this one down 2-1. So good games to both players, but Looter Scooter taking this one down with Blue-Red Epiphany versus Green-White Magecraft. Very well played from both sides. And now, so we've seen vampires versus vampires, and then we have werewolf versus werewolf. Our last 2 matches are both vampires versus werewolves. But before we get into that, we have some vampire and werewolf interviews we're going to take a look at as we take a quick little break. So while you watch these interviews, make sure you pop on over to Twitter and follow us on there at VMLMTG. Make sure you're following on us here. We're great. I mean, I think we're great. So... But we'll catch you all in a few minutes after these interviews. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Who, What, Werewolf. My name is Nicole Callahan, also known as Lady of the Crease. I am your hostess of Howls tonight, joined by the wonderful Maria. How are you doing?
I'm doing quite lovely.
And as you can see, we are Team Werewolf here. So Team Werewolf, but we're kind of headed into like a vampire-y set here. Is there anything you're looking forward to coming out of Crimson Vow? Maybe like your favorite card that's been previewed so far?
I really like Olivia Crimson Bride. I think that card is just sweet. I really like Reanimator stuff. Even though I'm a werewolf, some of the vampires are all right.
Yeah. It's like we could bury the hatchet. So do you think Olivia Crimson Bride would be your favorite vampire card, like in Magic in general?
No, I think so. The card's just really cool. I like a lot of Reanimator stuff, especially in Commander, and just being able to reanimate stuff and vampires is cool.
Vampires are pretty sweet. We got to give them credit where credit is due. They are pretty sweet.
Give them credit. Vampires are cool. Yeah.
They're all right. But werewolves have made a habit of storming and crashing things. So we saw storming the festival in the last set. And in this set, going to be crashing the wedding. So do you know the planeswalkers that will be crashing Olivia's wedding? Or are planning on crashing the wedding?
Is it Kaya? Kaya. I think Kaya is crashing the wedding.
I know it's. I think you might be right. I know that
Is it Kaya?
Chandra's gonna be there all dressed up, and Teferi's there, but
Chandra's definitely. She's definitely dressed to kill.
yes, definitely dressed to kill. And our main pack lady Arlen is also going to be there. So looking forward to that. I can't wait for the new set to come out and to see how these vampire cards shape up. Now, real quick, can you give me your werewolf name?
My werewolf name is Willow.
Well, that's a good one. Oh, I like Willow. That's a good one. That's a good one.
You.
And now, to close us out, can we get your best werewolf howl?
Oh!
Ooh! Oh! I love it! Well, Maria, thank you so much for your time, and good luck to you this season in VML.
Thank you so much. You too.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Interview with the Vampire. I am your Mistress of Midnight, Nicole Callahan, also known as Lady of the Crease, joined here by VML participant Real Joy. How are you doing tonight?
Doing all right. Yeah, I'm Sky Bauerschmidt Sweeney. So.
Sky, it's a pleasure. I'm so happy that you're here. We have a lot of things to look forward to. First off, a big wedding. Who's getting married?
Olivia and Edgar. I know these things because I'm.
Yeah, I would hope you know. I imagine that being on #Team Vampire, we are both invited to this wedding.
I hope so. I haven't gotten to go to a wedding in a long time. My brother basically eloped during COVID because COVID. So I'm itching for a good wedding. So vampire wedding is even better.
Yeah, vampire wedding is great, and this promises to be a good one. And speaking of, so are you Team Olivia or Team Soren?
I mean, we've seen the art on the new Soren card, right?
Yes, we have.
Okay, all right.
I mean, that is a very good point. So now, is Soren your favorite card that's been previewed so far in Crimson Vow, or?
So, from a sort of lighthearted flavor stance, it is not. My favorite card spoiled is the new Chandra, because I don't know what technology we need to develop for the flames on the dress, but I want that. So
I feel like that's a common, I kind of want that myself.
Yeah, no, I think everybody I've talked to who wears dresses wants that dress. So and then other than that, on a more serious side, I really like a lot of the training cards. I think that's very cool. It's like things we've seen, but it's a little different, and they've done a lot of cool things with it. So I hope we get to play with some of them in Standard.
Oh, that's great. Speaking of playing in Standard, I'm going to take a second and we're going to bury the hatchet. As a vampire, what is your favorite werewolf card?
My favorite werewolf card in Standard?
Oh, you know what? Give me anyone in Magic history. You can.
All right. Well, then I'm going to go for the boring old classic Huntmaster of the Fells. At this point, only really gets played in Cube, but it's just a gem. And yeah, I think that's my favorite werewolf card.
I mean, I think Huntmaster of the Fells is anything but boring. As are you, Sky. Thank you so much for joining us here today, and good luck to you the rest of this season.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to week 2 of the VML. If you are just joining us, my name is Nicole Callahan, also known as Lady of the Crease, and I am joined here by the wonderful Arya Karamchandani, also known as Hogpog. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Excited to see what'll presumably be more Izzet.
Don't spoil it for everyone. For those of you who are just joining us, welcome. If you don't know who we are the VML. We are a 10-week-long Magic the Gathering Arena League. We split into 8 divisions of 8, so that's 64 players. We play 7 weeks of round robin, cut to a playoff top 24, and we go all the way through 16, 8, 4, 2 until we have just one person that we will send to the next future set championship that Wizards had. So big thanks to Wizards for their support. They also win some Channel Fireball Pro subscriptions. So thanks to Channel Fireball for their support, and the NRG series for making our league possible. Also a big shout out to our fabulous producer Phoebe for doing such a phenomenal job and giving us all a nice little break there. We all love you, Phoebe. Thank you. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to get into more of that Izzet action. Izzet and X action. But we'll start by looking at an Izzet deck here. This is out of division number 8. We've got Blazin on Team Werewolf here. Blazin bringing Izzet Dragons. So we see the 4 of Smoldering Egg, 4 of Goldspan Dragons, some Dragon's Fires, and other things. Do you see anything crazy, notable about this deck, or anything you love?
It seems to be fairly straightforward. Like we've noted for basically all the Izzet decks today, there are once again 3 copies of Alrund's Epiphany rather than the 4/4. But aside from that, fairly stock list.
It's so crazy to me. Like, Alrund's Epiphany, I imagine, has to come out in some matchups. It's perhaps debate because we do open deck lists here at the VML, and you can change your deck list from week to week. So depending on what your opponent is playing, I suppose, I guess, does Alrund's Epiphany come out against certain matchups or some number of them?
It definitely does. In fact, it comes out in a lot of matchups. Against decks with things like Redain, you don't want any Alrund's Epiphanies just because it's a bit of a liability against an aggressive deck that can make it cost even more than its already rather steep price. And it also will come out in some number against other blue decks because you can't really afford to have 4 of a 7-drop that gets countered by 2 and 3 mana spells. That'll just put you too far behind.
Oh, that sounds like not a good time for our Izzet players. So we see Blazin just going to start with the regular three copies. 3 copies is a good place to start. And we see a lot of people having a lot of love for that Chandra Dress to Kill, as we also saw in our interviews earlier. Chandra Dress to Kill, a very exciting card in Crimson Vow here. Now let's take a look at Blazin's opponent, Piper. Piper's on Dimir control. Now, how does this matchup pan out? Like, what are the key cards here? What's Piper going to be looking for? What's Piper going to be looking to avoid? What do you think?
Yeah, for the most part, decks like Blue-Black Control, in theory at least, are quite poorly positioned against Blue-Red. Lear as a threat, for example, is not very good in a matchup where tapping low on turn 5 through 7 could get you really punished by something like Epiphany. And all the creature removal is not great against stock, is it? There might be a little better against dragons than turns. That said, seeing as those are something of liabilities for the Dimir deck, this Dimir deck really has a few cards that it leans really, really hard on that are excellent in this matchup. So we see 3 go blank in the main, 1 in the sideboard, 4 duress. So while there's a lot of awkward and clunky cards, there's also a lot of cards that are single-handedly going to try and make up for that difference and just be more powerful and efficient answers than the threats the Dragons deck is playing.
I love me a good duress. I'm very interested to see how Piper is going to cast duresses. You cast it on turn 1, or you wait till like turn 3 or 4 when things start to get real. So we'll see how she decides to deploy them perhaps in this matchup. Let's get in here. Blazin on Izzet Dragons versus Piper on Dimir control. We'll be watching from the side of Blazing as they wait to see if Piper's going to choose to be on the play or draw here. I'm going to guess that Piper would like to be on the play, and that will be the case. And Blazing will take a look at what looks like a no land hand, but actually is a 2-land hand, but kind of awkwardly 2 lands. So that one will get shipped back.
There's some matchups in which you want hands like that, but this really isn't one of them, with all the removal spells being basically dead. That was essentially a 5-god hand.
Yes, and saying that the removal spells seem mostly dead, we'll see the the Hammer Pass coming in as a land tapped turn 1, drawing a second Stratus Skull, actually. And Smoldering Egg is on the battlefield. So our first real action of the game as Piper casts a Behold the Multiverse at the end of Blazon's second turn. See a top, a bottom, draw 2, a land, and a pass of the turn. Goldspan Dragon the draw here, but not much to do at the moment. So...
Right. And with that main phase, Behold the Multiverse on turn 2, and then this upkeep, Fading Hope on turn 3, I think the read here would be that Piper doesn't have lands in hand and was scrying in that spot to try and find a land to make sure she can play lands on time every turn, because otherwise she'll fall pretty far behind.
Yeah, I imagine making your land drops would be extremely important in a matchup like this. We'll see Allrun's Epiphany going to be foretold here. Smoldering Egg back on the battlefield, but going to be Divide by 0. So return to hand and Environmental Sciences. So if Piper was stuck on lands before, it seems that she's doing pretty okay now. Island to hand and then on to the battlefield. And here's that Duress. So nice, whether or not Piper had just drawn it or anything, but turn 5 Duress is pretty late.
Yeah, not the most effective here against Goldspan. And going back to Piper's intro slide, her answers to questions, she mentioned Goldspan being the hardest threat to answer efficiently for her deck. And if she doesn't have a removal spell here, it's just going to produce too much mana in conjunction with this Alrun's Epiphany.
Yeah, and you can see having to kill it, making a treasure. Piper playing just 1 Soul Shatter. Honestly, Soul Shatter being one of the only clean answers at the moment in the format. Maybe Soul Shatter, like a Tybalt or a Professor Onyx, but not really seeing those so much as soon as the ultimatums rotated out. So not too many clean answers in the format for Goldspan Dragon.
Yep, and even something like Tybalt or Professor Onyx, the Goldspan Dragon still gets to attack, still gets to make at least 1 treasure. So it's really just Soul Shatter and counter spells that allow you to deal with Goldspan without having to go down slightly on mana and let them get a treasure.
Oh, so definitely a very good point. And we see Piper with 1 Soul Shatter in the main and 1 in the side. We see Gold Blank taking care of the rest of Blazon's hand here and the graveyard. So all gone, just a single Smoldering Egg and an Allrun's Epiphany waiting in the wings. A land draw for turn here. Piper with 4 mana up. What do you think? It's not like Blazon has too much of a choice, but to deploy the Allrun's Epiphany at this point, I would think. What's your opinion here?
Yeah, it's kind of an unfortunate spot for Piper almost, in that she's so far ahead by every metric, but if she doesn't have an answer to this Alrun's Epiphany, none of it matters. She needs to be able to make sure this Epiphany doesn't resolve, and even with the counterspell, the Epiphany is still in hand, so that's still a threat that Piper has to deal with. And if Piper just goes to play something like the Mascot Exhibition next turn, she could fall really far behind to the Epiphany plus an egg.
Yes, well, it looks like Divide by 0, getting that exhibition, and then Fading Hope, the Smoldering Egg back to hand, might put Blazon back just the littlest bit, but not too much. So Mascot Exhibition is going to be the play from Piper's side. Make some creatures here. We got some mascots in play now, and Piper debating on what to do. Perhaps see if playing a land tapped and a Frostboil Snarl is the draw on Blazon's side. So Piper's totally shields down now. The question is, what to do. And it looks like redeploying the Smoldering Egg might be the play on Blazen's side.
Yeah, Blazin really wants to have that Smoldering Egg in play when the Alrund's Epiphany is cast so that it gets flipped. And that was exactly why Piper spent that Divide by Zero in that spot. If Piper had just gone for Mascot Exhibition and not bounced a Smoldering Egg, there wouldn't have mattered that Piper was getting a bunch of power and toughness in play, because a flipped egg with Epiphany would probably still have just taken over the game. But by bouncing that egg, Piper essentially ensures that Blazin can't cast the Alrund's Epiphany this turn, and also ensures that Blazin has to leave the Alrund's Epiphany in hand to be able to cast for 7 mana to flip the egg, as opposed to 6 from from exile with Foretell. And this means that something like a Duress could take the Epiphany in this spot.
Now we saw that Memory Deluge get cast with flashback in the main phase, and a Blood Chief's Thirst going to take care of that Smoldering Egg. Shatter Skull smashing the draw here, but it looks like Blazen's sort of out of options. So Alrund's Epiphany it is, making a couple of 1/1s. Not really any value here. So Piper not letting Blazin get the value off of that Epiphany. Just a Jawari disruption here. And Shatter Skull smashing going to be cast as a spell, pumping it up to 6. Might as well do the full 6. A little bit of overkill, but hey, when you've got the mana, why not? I'm not crazy about sacking the treasure, though.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but kind of has to be done.
Yeah.
Blazin can't let Piper just have one of those creatures sticking around. Both of them kind of need to be answered. At least the Inkling can be blocked by a bird.
As you can see, Blazin very quickly down to 11 life. No cards in hand. Piper, 2 cards in hand, but also has the Hall of the Storm Giants. Ooh, and that'll do it. Lear was all right, I can't beat that card. So Blazin scoops them up. Piper will take down game number 1 here, and we will move to sideboards. We'll go over the sideboard here. I'll skip over the lessons. So we have 1 Fading Hope, 3 Burning Hands, 2 Cinderclasm, 4 Malevolent Hermit, 1 Test of Talents, a Heated Debate, and a Prismari Command. What are your thoughts? A Malevolent Hermit seems to be a very prevalent sideboard card nowadays, especially in these decks. So I imagine that's just specifically for the mirror. Does that mean you want to leave in some removal on the other side?
Almost certainly, particularly against an Epiphany deck like this. Yeah, with Alrund's Epiphany and Malevolent Hermit in the deck, you need to be able to remove the Hermit, because if you don't, then Alrund's Epiphany being uncounterable is often enough to just win the game.
And we'll see Blazin keeping 7 here. Very low curve 7, and Piper just right out of the gate is going to duress. Let's see what's going on. I want to see what you got in your hand. The Jawari Disruption will bite the dust, and a second Malevolent Hermit will be the draw on Blazin's side. And we'll see playing a Lava Glide Pathway and one of the Malevolent Hermits. So the first Hermit is on the battlefield. Piper aware of the island and the double Fading Hope in Blazin's hand, and a Thundering Rebuke will be the draw here. Second Malevolent Hermit. And hey, they're good for beats too. Not just for counters.
Some really smart and interesting play here with the lands from Blazin. You'll notice that Blazin played both the tap land, both the pathways first, even though those are lands you have to make the decisions with. And even though that might at first glance seem suboptimal, recognizing that there's Frostball Snarls in the deck as potential draws that make holding a basic land better, Blazin played out the pathways first, and that definitely gives them better potential draws.
All right, so that's a very good point. There's nothing worse than drawing a tap land when you need an untap land. We'll see Behold the Multiverse on the attack step here to try to tempt Blazin into sacking their Malevolent Hermit, perhaps. That's not going to happen. So Blazin going to get across for another 2, down to 16, as Piper did bottom both of those cards from the Behold the Multiverse. So we see Piper on 3 lands and the 4th land, as we were just talking about, tap lands. Tap lands can kind of feel pretty bad sometimes, as Blazin did bolt in that Shatter Skull, the Hammer Pass last turn. Soul Shatter from Piper here. Probably wanting to hold on to that for a Goldspan Dragon, but doesn't look like Piper has that opportunity. Going to kind of be hand force kind of here. I don't know. Piper's at 16 life. This is an attack for 4. Do you think Soul Shatter could be? Do you think that could be a little hasty, maybe?
Yeah, the thing is that these guys have to be dealt with at some point, and you'll notice that there's that one blue mana always being left out. And at first glance, that might seem to be for the Hermit, but what Piper really wants to make sure doesn't happen here is Blazon getting a chance to Fading Hope one of their own benevolent guys, because then that's another 2 cards that are going to have to be dealt with. That's a malevolent hermit that's going to trade for a card, and then the Geist itself is going to trade for another card. So these Fading Hopes actually representing a really scary back-to-back 2-for-1s if Piper doesn't time removal spells well.
No, that's super impressive to realize that, Fading Hope to use on your own creatures to get an extreme amount of value. And we'll see Blazon valuing those Fading Hopes and keeping both of them during that go blank. We'll see a Leer here, but not the instant scoop like happened last game, as Thundering Rebuke is in hand for Blazon. We'll see what happens. Bloodchief's Thirst on one of the Hermits. And like you said, we'll see that Fading Hope get deployed to bounce it back to hand. So Malevolent Hermit back to hand. Benevolent Geist. One still on the battlefield.
Yep, and in this spot, the Divide by 0 on top of Blazon's deck is really a tricky decision. On one hand, Divide by 0 is certainly pretty powerful in this spot when they're being aggressive, when they have the ability to use it to answer more clunkier threats that Piper would use in this spot to try and catch up. But at the same time, if Blazon can find a land next turn, they're going to be able to Malevolent Hermit, Thundering Rebuke the Lair, and also leave up either Fading Hope or the Hermit Sack. And that's something that Piper's going to have a really hard time beating. So Blazon is incentivized to maybe try and be a little greedy and try and find that extra land in this spot.
No, for sure. And it looks like Divide by 0 is the Thoughtseize bug there. So we're like, wait a second. I'm pretty sure I put that on the bottom. But Divide by 0 will be the draw for turn on Blazon's side anyway. Thundering Rebuke will take care of that Leer. And we're back to where we were a couple turns ago. I will say Blazon missing on a few land drops. So
yeah. And you'll notice that at one point, Blazon even opted to avoid playing out Shadow Skull Smashing, even when they had the opportunity to. And that's just them recognizing that in this spot, they're not necessarily winning the long card advantage game. What they're winning with is the fact that if they keep their cards protected from go blank, if they can just make sure one or two of these guys stick, there's really not much Piper can prevent these guys from doing to just like run over Piper in the late game. And she doesn't really have any options there.
Oh no, Tapland, no, why? We see Piper empty-handed at 2, Goldspan Dragon in play. And remember how I talked about how Taplands feel so bad? Well, we'll see this Hallstorm Giants getting across for 7, Blazon down to 10. It will come down to an answer for this Goldspan Dragon, and with no cards in hand, I suppose there is no answer. Goldspan Dragon going to finish off game number 2. So we got 1 game apiece for both of our players here as we head into game number 3. Is there anything that you saw during game 2 as far as sideboarding that would make you want to change your sideboard plan?
Yeah, I could see Piper reconsidering her sideboard plans, seeing as there those Fading Hopes and Thundering Rebukes, and neither of which might have been the most obvious card to stay in post-board in this matchup, though they do both fill very particular roles. Unfortunately for Piper, there's really just not that much in her sideboard that she could change. She doesn't really have much by way of winning the game except Lear, so she doesn't really have a choice but to lean on that and try and win with Lear, awkward as it might be against some of the more efficient interaction in Blazon's deck.
Yeah, a lot of control decks, they just have a limited amount of win conditions. Lear and I think Hall of Storm Giants may be the only ways. There's a couple of like Nighthawk Scavengers and Malevolent Hermits of her own in the sideboard as well. But we see the plethora of removal, like you said, in Blazon's hand, like right now.
Yeah, one thing that's worth noting that with all those removal spells we saw this game, the Nighthawk Scavengers are almost definitely not coming in. There's just no way you can bring them in against a bunch of heated debates, Thundering Rebukes, and a bunch of removal that lines up very efficiently against them. So Piper's probably leaving those in the sideboard if there was any chance she was bringing them in the first place.
And now, this has been a very quick few first turns where nobody's really done anything yet. Just a draw, go, draw, go, draw, go. But we see our first move is being made by Blazon here, Memory Deluge, revealing a Goldspan Dragon, a Dragon's Fire, and 2 islands. So with the double Shatter Skull Smashing and the River Glide pathway in hand, I'm not sure. It looks like 1 land will be taken. Like you said, land drops, very important in this matchup. But threats is just equally as important. So Goldspan Dragon on the battlefield. And there's the clean answer in Soul Shatter from Piper's side. 1 of 2, I'd imagine, that Piper has in her deck at the moment. The Celestis. What is your thought of the Celestis in this matchup?
In this matchup, it's actually pretty good for the blue-black deck. One of the blue-black deck's weaknesses is that the Izzet deck has Goldspan Dragon, which is this way to try and just generate a mana advantage over the mid to late game. And the blue-black deck doesn't really have much by ways to get ahead on mana, except for that Celestis, which does pretty good work just being a mana rock, with the day-night decks maybe not being the most relevant in this matchup.
Sure. So that seems definitely an interesting card, and some incidental life gain, whether or not that would matter or not. We'll see. Goldspan Dragon. This is attempt number 3 after getting the first one killed. The second one bounced. Will this third one survive? 3rd time's the charm. Infernal Grasp is the first attempt at an answer, and it looks like Blazon would like to answer back and say, Test of Talents here, Infernal Grasp. Let's see what's going on. And just as beneficial to countering the spell, you also get to take a look at your opponent's hand and see what's going on here. And we can see 3 lands, a Leer, and a Bloodchief's Thirst in Piper's hand. So any thoughts there on like future turns, or how Blazon should space out their threats? Or
so we saw Piper mention at the start of this match itself that one problem a deck has is efficiently interacting with Goldspan Dragon. And over here, even though that Goldspan Dragon is likely going to die to that Bloodchief's Thirst, it's generated a treasure on being targeted by that Infernal Grasp. It's going to generate another treasure on being targeted by the Bloodchief's Thirst. And with that Memory Deluge in Blazon's graveyard, Blazon's really going to be able to leverage all that extra mana. And that's going to put Piper in a slightly awkward spot here.
We'll see Leer be the play here, giving all those spells some flashback, and deciding to flashback the Soul Shatter. And in response, heated debate on the Leer. We'll use those treasures. I'm very happy that they tap for double at the moment. So heated debate will take care of Leer. Soul Shatter will take care of Goldspan Dragon. And we're back at parity, right?
Yep, but going for that Leer instead of the Bloodchief's Thirst in this spot means that Piper now has no threats. Meanwhile, Blazon has multiple card advantage spells with the Expressive Iteration and Memory Deluge, and they're just very firmly ahead in the long game because, well, Blazon had to trade down slightly and doesn't really have an efficient answer for something like the Hall of the Stormchant, which is going to be dealing a bunch of damage. Doesn't really have I win the game threats like Alrund's Epiphany that Blazon has. So they're gonna have to win. She's gonna have to win the old-fashioned way, just by slowly getting advantage with her control deck. Meanwhile, Blazon is in the spot where Piper can't afford to tap out, because if she does, then Blazon might just win. And at the same time, gets to slowly keep applying pressure with this Hall of Stormchants.
Well, we see Field of Ruin on Piper's side that just hit the battlefield. So hopefully, well, that's what Piper's hoping to do here as she looted away a couple of cards, cast Go Blank on Blazin, who still is managing to keep a pretty healthy hand here with 3 cards. It'll be after this expressive iteration has resolved. We're seeing a Memory Deluge, a Divide by Zero, and I saw it coming. What cards do you value the most here at this point in the game?
Well, I think the Memory Deluge is definitely getting exiled because it's the only thing you can reasonably cast this turn. At which point, it doesn't really matter which of the 2 counter spells, or there's some argument for both. The Saw It Coming is a better counter spell, and the Divide by Zero is only going to be bouncing something temporarily. But at the same time, the Divide by Zero is going to get yet another threat for Blazin. So there's definitely appeal to a bounce spell that's also going to get something like a Mascot Exhibition, which is yet another thing Piper has to deal with. The Go Blank there was one of the better draws for Piper. It allowed her to at least stay in the game by answering the Memory Deluge that was going to be a huge card advantage spell for Blazin. But with those hits off iteration, Piper's still pretty far behind in this spot, I believe.
Yeah, I liked that Blazin, although getting across with that Hall of the Storm Giants last turn, recognized that Piper had Field of Ruin and would just be wasting their turn here if they decided to attack with it again. So went with the card advantage, expressive iteration, casting Memory Deluge, and got a lot of value out of that turn. So it was a pretty good turn, I think, on Blazin's side. And we'll see Field of Ruin ultimately will take care of that Hall of Storm Giants and will pass the turn back. The Celestis Knight will go to day again, gaining a life up to 11, going to discard a second copy of the Celestis, looting that away, and we'll see what Piper does at this point. Oh, Lear. Oh boy.
Yeah.
That's a good card.
Alia's a scary threat in this spot, though. With the amount of mana it costs, if it's bounced, at least Piper won't be able to recast it and then also cast something like Go Blank.
So we'll see that worked out back to hand, and Piper deciding what to do now. Nighthawk Scavenger did come in. It is Death Touch, Lifelink Flying, where its power is equal to the number of types of cards in your opponent's graveyard. But a Thundering Rebuke would be a pretty clean answer to that, and it looks like that's what Blazin's going to do, unless Piper has something to say about it.
Yeah, and we're gonna again. It's again this interesting balance for both the decks where Nighthawk Scavenger is not ideal against all the removal Blazin still has in that Piper saw, but at the same time, Piper doesn't really have good answers to Goldspan Dragon, and Nighthawk Scavenger kind of does the job there, so it's almost a necessary evil, even though it's not necessarily at its best here.
Yeah, so we'll see another expressive iteration. The expressive iteration will go into hand, and a Malevolent Hermit will be the exiled card off of that first iteration. That'll go right into play, leaving that blue up. Second iteration going to reveal a Dissipate, an All Runs Epiphany, and a Riverglide Pathway. Looks like it's time for Epiphany this time. Epiphany was passed over in the Memory Deluge Blazin had cast earlier, but feeling comfortable enough now to cast that. And Malevolent Hermit just out there as a 2/1 now.
Yeah, and this is a really heads up play from Blazin, recognizing that yes, they're leaving on the table the ability for Piper to go Leah, flashback, Go Blank, get rid of the Memory Deluge and 2 cards from Blazin's hand. That's going to be slightly too tempting of a line for them to pass up, most likely. But at the same time, if there's no counterspell among the last couple of cards in Piper's hand, it doesn't look like they'd have had mana to cast that counterspell anyway. Blazin's going to be able to go Goldspan plus Elrond's Epiphany, and I don't think there's much that Piper can do to beat that.
Yeah, and it looks like that will be the line here. Goldspan Dragon from Blazin's side. A slight pause from Piper, but oh no. In it goes. Goldspan Dragon into the red zone. A Fading Hope targeting that Goldspan Dragon. Gonna make some treasure here. Treasure will resolve, but back to hand with the gold span, making another treasure. And off of those 2 treasures, All Runs Epiphany will be cast. Oh, sorry. Off of one of those 2 treasures, the All Runs Epiphany will be cast. Oh my. A second All Runs Epiphany will be the draw here. Is this going to do it?
I've got to imagine it will. Piper has access to that Fading Hope still, and so the gold span's not going to hit her this turn either. But with the birds hitting this turn, the birds hitting next turn, and the gold span, even if that isn't exactly lethal, I believe that's 10 damage with Piper being at 11, it seems unlikely that Piper will be able to come back from that spot.
Yeah, we'll see Piper down to 9, an island to draw for turn. Gold span once again onto the battlefield, getting in, making more treasures, and a memory deluge in hand. That would not be enough to cast another Epiphany, but certainly can do some work. It looks like Spikefield Hazard and All Runs Epiphany will be.
And Hazard's going to be lethal here.
Oh, Hazard is a lethal. Listen, Spikefield Hazard, all these big threats. You got your Gold Span Dragons, your Epiphanies. It's like Lear. You got all these huge creatures, all of the Storm Giants. But what's going to do it? Ping.
Every point counts.
Every point does count. And we'll see that match go 2-1 to Blazin'. But what a close match. That was a real, like, it's funny how those matches start. And it's like so quiet. It's just like land, go, land, go, land, go. And then all of a sudden, boom. It's like memory deluge, Lear, bounce your thing, counter your thing. It's boom. You know, there's a lot of boom going on in that matchup. Definitely very enjoyable. Good games to both of our competitors. So let's chalk on up to Team Werewolf. Arya, what team are you on?
I'm on Team Vampire.
Are you? I'm a werewolf.
Ah.
I was just curious. But we do have one more big match here. Coming out of Division 4 this time, we have Caroline, TheMightyLinguine, and Jana Amari. And we're going to take a look at Jana's deck first here. We have Izzet Epiphany. Surprise! So we see a lot of the usual suspects here. Expressive Iteration, Demon Bolt, Thundering Rebuke, Dragon's Fire. We've got a couple of Battle of Frost and Fire. 2 of them, in fact, in the main deck. What is your thoughts on that card?
It's an interesting one. It's one that it's one that really fluctuates in how much it sees play. It's a matter of that or burn down the house, with different lists choosing a different one of those 2 as their board wipes. In this matchup specifically, I suspect the battle will be significantly worse than burn down the house, because there's Imrit as a 5 toughness threat. Ren and 7's token is sometimes a 5 toughness threat. So it's a board wipe that might end up being slightly worse than burn down the house in this spot, but definitely has its appeal as a board wipe that also has text in other matchups because it draws cards.
Yes, and we'll see how that will line up against the TheMightyLinguine's deck on our other side. We have Caroline, who is in fact on blue-green ramp that is Simic ramp Caroline. And some interesting cards here. It's just like gonna play a bunch of big stuff. Like I haven't really seen a successful Coma Cosmos Serpent since Ultimatum went away. And with cards like Fading Hope, it makes me like all nervous, being like, oh man, I'm gonna play the 7-mana thing. It's just gonna bounce to my hand. But Caroline's also playing 4 of her own Fading Hopes here. Do you have any thoughts? Any like cards here that you like, dislike, love in the matchup? Can't wait to see being boarded in or being boarded out.
That bind on Fading Hope against Goma is really spot on, with Goma definitely not being quite the unanswerable threat it used to be, with almost all blue decks running a bunch of Fading Hope and a bunch of Divide by Zero as pieces of interaction that don't counter your Coma, so to speak. Even Divide by Zero just returns to hand from the stack. But that said, the one thing that Coma does have going for it is that the main thing keeping it down earlier, burning hands out of the sideboard, is not a card that's seeing any play right now. So while yes, things like Fading Hope and Divide by Zero can bounce the Coma, it's harder to answer permanently than maybe Jana would like in this matchup. And on top of that, Coma with having at the beginning of every turn trigger, making a snake, means taking extra turns against Coma is a lot less efficient than taking extra turns against a bunch of other things, and is going to prevent your Hall of Storm Giants from attacking by just producing a snake every turn that can block if needed.
Yeah, that used to be one of my favorite things. I play the Coma, and then your opponent would cast Epiphany, and it'd be like, well, that's fine, but I'm just going to make a bunch more snakes. Some Coma's coils coming at you. Well, let's see how these two decks line up against each other here. We've got MightyLinguine on Simic Ramp and Jana Amari on Izzet Epiphany. We will be watching from the side of Jana. We've got Caroline on the top. And let's take a look at this opener. Not very appealing to me. What is your first thoughts?
Yeah, this hand is not ideal. You do need more lands than two, particularly in a matchup like this where the game's going to go long. Caroline's hand, on the other hand, looks pretty good.
So Briarbird's Tracker, a card that I feel like is a one of in a lot of decks. People have been still trying it out, testing it out. So I feel like the jury's still out on it. Briarbird's Tracker, although Caroline is playing 3 of in her deck, so we'll see. A couple lands drawn on that side, and a Behold the Multiverse will be foretold on the side of Jana. Jana did keep this hand, so really hoping for a third land. That's a really awkward third land.
Yeah, though she has access to that Behold, so I don't think she's going to have trouble finding answers. Behold the Multiverse actually a really good card for these blue-red Galvanic Iteration decks specifically. While other decks often rely on Memory Deluge for their mana advantage, what Behold the Multiverse does is it's a card advantage spell you can copy off Galvanic Iteration. That's not something these decks otherwise have access to. Memory Deluge cares about the amount of mana you spend to cast it, so if you copy it off Iteration, that's not really doing anything at all for you. But Behold the Multiverse, in conjunction with Galvanic Iteration, gives the deck the ability to get a lot of card advantage, and that's something that's really nice for the deck.
Very nice. And we see Jana just snapping off 2 lands on top with that Behold the Multiverse. Was like, yes, please, give them to me. 2 untapped lands, so a Pathway and a Mountain in hand, as Epiphany will also be the draw for turn. So double Epiphany in hand. Not a fast start from Caroline's side, though. It can get out of hand real fast, but just Divide by Zero and double Renin 7 in hand. So and Jana does have an answer for this tracker if need be as well. Another land on Caroline's side. So thoughts on the game state so far?
Not the fastest start for Caroline, but still not all that bad for her. She has Interaction, which is pretty important for her in this matchup. And with the Renin 7s, she has threats that Jana doesn't have super efficient interaction for. That changes, of course, with the newly drawn Jawari Disruption. But that Battle of Frost and Fire, once these Renin 7s come down, is not going to kill the Tree Folk that comes with them because, like we mentioned, there's 4 damage rather than 5. So if run out on turn 5, the Renin 7 is just going to generate a large enough Tree Folk that it's not killable with Battle of Frost and Fire.
Jana's very close to being able to cast back-to-back Epiphanies as well, having 2 of them in the Foretell zone at the moment. Caroline's going to crack that clue, draw on a card. And we see Chariot the draw. And a Root Coil Creep. Oh, no, wait, no, sorry. That is not Root Coil. That is Decisive Denial. Decisive Denial is the draw there as well. Decisive Denial is a choose 1 target creature you control fights target creature you do not control, or a counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 3. So.
And really heads up play by Caroline there, recognizing that even though she has threats she can run out, her best bet in a spot like this is making sure she doesn't fall behind to a counter spell, and at some point in the later game be able to run out a threat with counter backup, and then have an answer to follow up Epiphany from Jana after her counter spell.
Yeah, and we'll see land after the Tangle Flora Hedron draw, and Chariot going to be the play here. Jana going to allow that to come down. So a couple kitties. Not for long. Destroying target artifact and dealing 2. So going to kill one of the cats, destroy the chariot they rode in on, and oh, or not. Oh, see, Jana's just trying to psych me out here. Destroy target artifact, and here we go. Making a treasure. So deciding a 2/2 cat is not worth that mode. Gonna build up mana with those 2 Alrund's Epiphanies waiting in the wings here. So we'll see if Caroline allows this to happen with the decisive denial up.
Yeah, and that was a good call from Jana. I think recognizing that her best bet to win this is to be able to get to a spot where she can Galvanic Iteration plus Elrond's Epiphany. So it's much more important for her to try and potentially get that 8 mana than it is to be able to kill one of the cats, which is probably going to get swept away by this Battle of Frost and Fire anyway.
Yeah, and it looks like she is just about there. Has an iteration and a Jawari Disruption in hand here. Is this worth fighting over is the question. Decisive denial from Caroline's side.
It might be. Jana doesn't have much of it. It's unlikely Jana's going to get another opportunity to use the Jawari Disruption, though giving up on the treasure is pretty big because it means that Elrond's Epiphany plus Galvanic Iteration is not something that's going to happen for a while still.
Let's see Field of Ruin, the draw from Caroline's side. So a couple of running 7s there. They can definitely make some biggins too. We got 7 lands in play on Caroline's side. Running 7, making some 7/7s. It's a little tempting.
Yeah. Some really disciplined play from Caroline here. Just recognizing that if a turn passes, if she manages to get a Ren 7 down with Divide by 0 backup, there's really not much Jana can do. But in this spot, if she taps out for Ren 7, there's a reasonable chance that Jana's able to just take several extra turns at a time and win the game before Caroline even gets to untap. Whereas if a Ren 7's played with a Disruption up, that's unlikely that Jana's going to get to take more than 1 extra turn at a time, and Caroline should be pretty safe at that point.
All right, and we'll see Jawari Ruins getting played here as a land. Going to give up on trying to get Caroline the Force Spike and pass the turn back. And we'll see now a little more mana on Caroline's side, having played that Tangleflora Hedron as a creature, playing down the Field of Ruin as well. Making sure to tap that Hall of Storm Giants before casting this Renin 7, it looks like, is the play.
Yeah. And playing out the Jawari Ruins from Jana, again, another just really strong play, just recognizing that, yes, there is actually a pretty decent chance that with multiple spells being cast, Jana could counter a spell from Caroline. But with Jana knowing what's on top of her deck, knowing there's a land there, this guarantees that she'll be able to go Galvanic Iteration plus Elrond's Epiphany next turn, have 8 mana. And that's kind of all that matters here. So it's fine if she gives up on a potential card off of that Jawari Disruption.
Yes, but not before that Tangleflora Hedron gets across and brings Janet down to 15. So we'll see. We'll see that be the play here. Galvanic Iteration going to be the play into that Elrond's Epiphany. If Caroline does not bounce us back to hand. I suppose this is the turn of decisions, and it looks like we'll let that happen. So Galvanic Iteration will trigger Battle of Frostfire. All these triggers on the stack on that Elrond's Epiphany cast and copy. And it looks like Caroline is deciding on what to do here.
Yep. Even with the Divide by 0 for the Elrond's Epiphany, Caroline's not in a great spot. There's that other Elrond's Epiphany foretold. Jana has 8 lands in play and is going to get to draw 2 cards here and then 1 for her turn next turn, up to 3 cards to try and find an untapped land. And if she finds an untapped land, she can flashback Iteration Epiphany and take 2 more turns, making 4 more birds. And at that point, she has several draws to find lethal. In fact, with just a Mascot Exhibition in hand, she should have lethal. So she just needs to find an untapped land in the top 3 cards. And I believe that would give Jana the game.
Oh, there's 2 untapped lands. So there you go. A mountain and an island. So she can even pick her color. So counting up the mana, discarding that mountain, making sure that not to discard the ever important 8th land here, or I guess 9th land here. Galvanic Iteration again, flashing it back, back that Epiphany. And all of the turns are now Jana's, making a bunch of birds. And so in for 2, Caroline down to 18, Spikefield Hazard the draw, Expressive Iteration here, but that's enough. We're going to move on to sideboards here as Jana takes down game number 1 versus Caroline Kavanaugh, the Mighty Linguine. And we'll see those lyrics come in and the Cyclone Summoners real quick. I know Cyclone Summoner has ruined my day quite a few times playing some creature decks. So what are your thoughts here on the sideboards?
Yeah, Summon is definitely excellent against a deck that's trying to put a bunch of permanents into play with Comas and Ren 7s. Just like setting Caroline's board back to 0 is huge. Fading Hope is an interesting cut, given that Ren 7 and Coma are both rather good to hit with that, but understandable given that Jana actually has a couple copies of Burning Hand in her 75, and those do a better job answering both Ren 7 tokens and Coma since they answer both of those threats permanently.
Right. Yes, and it looks like that's definitely the choice here. And we see, some notable things staying in the sideboard, sort of like shaving not bringing in the the Smoldering Eggs or the Goldspan Dragon. No real interest in those. They kind of just get outsized and outclassed by what Caroline is trying to put on the battlefield. And now we'll take a look at Caroline's sideboard here. Any thoughts on this? Are any of the big any of the big boom booms coming out? Are we keeping in Mirth? Are we keeping in Ren and 7, Coma? Any of that coming out?
The Comas are getting cut somewhat understandably. They're awkward against Cyclone Summoner, awkward against Burning Hands, awkward against Divide by Zero. Even Ren 7 is borderline because it's a 5-mana threat. But at the same time, there's 3 Disdainful Strokes coming and going up to 3 Test of Talents and 4 Decisive Denials and 4 Divide by Zeros. As a blue-red Epiphany player, the last thing I want to see is my opponent having 14 counter spells.
That is a lot of counter spells. And so we see Caroline on the play here, going to keep 7. Jana on the draw, also keeping 7. A very low curve hand from either side, surprisingly enough. We've got no cards over. Oh, there's a Memory Deluge in Caroline's hand, so she has high card here. But no 6 or 7 drops yet. And we'll see an Island and a Root Coil Creeper come down. And a pass back of the turn. Any thoughts on these openers?
Yeah, I mean, from Caroline's perspective, this opener is about as close to perfect as you could get. Root Gall Creeper, definitely one of the things that's most likely to leave her with an advantage in this matchup, because what it does is it lets her get a mana advantage early, and then that just plus a pile of counter spells and card advantage to make sure she doesn't run out of gas. I don't know that I could sculpt a better opening hand for Caroline if I tried.
Yeah, it looks like she just wants to march out an army of 2/2s here, too. Even though Recoil obviously making the mana there to be able to leave up Decisive Denial. Caroline now has 4 lands in play, and these 2/2s that can produce some beats. So we'll see. Not choosing to not do that, however. Jana trying to divide by 0 one of them. And we can see why Caroline held off on attacking.
Yeah, in this spot, Caroline getting to leave up, despite being on turn 4, getting to have a counter spell and also a Memory Deluge to make sure she keeps finding gas, keeps finding more counter spells in her, in her 14 counter spell deck. Just make sure she manages to stay ahead in this spot is so huge. Even with she can just let the Divide by 0 resolve in this spot, and that allows her to resolve a Memory Deluge, keep having mana up for counter spells, and that Memory Deluge flashback going to be surprisingly cheap with 2 Root Gall Creepers, both of which provide double the amount of mana for Memory Deluge.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It's funny letting it produce 2 mana for when you cast a spell with flashback. So we'll see that recoil eventually going back to hand, though, and environmental sciences on the side of Jana. So Jana going to cast that lesson, but decisive denial on the environmental sciences. So Jana will just play a mountain and pass the turn. Caroline drawing a card here, a Briarbridge tracker. So are we staying on like the straight and narrow? We're still like on the beatdown plan on Caroline's side? Or what do you say?
I think in the spot for Caroline, she's just looking to try and get a card and mana advantage. We talked about countering that environmental sciences, just recognizing that she still has 3 more counter spells in hand. She has a Memory Deluge that's going to draw her 2 more cards and get a lot of card selection as well. So as long as she just like keeps that card advantage, keeps that mana advantage, make sure to leave counter spells up so there's nothing like an unexpected Windfall resolving or a Goldspan Dragon out of the sideboard should Jana have brought that in. Caroline just gets further and further ahead because the mana advantage she is going to let her build more of a mana and card advantage as the game progresses. So it's just going to be putting Jana further and further behind unless she finds a way to efficiently interact with Caroline's mana creatures and also develop threats of her own.
Yeah, and it looks like Caroline's doing okay. Briarbridge Tracker, definitely a good threat. A little compact, just a 4/3, a pretty modest 4/3. But Jana down to 16 and with no real answer for it at the moment. So let's see the second root coil come down and a pass of the turn back with plenty of mana to work with from Caroline's side. Expressive Iteration is going to be the play from Jana here. And we'll see, what are we looking for? Is it double Galvanic Iteration in an island? I'm not sure. But
no, I don't think so. And this is a spot in which Caroline can just change gears all of a sudden. Next turn, if she draws a land, she's going to be able to leave 3 counter spells up and attack for 8, presenting a 2-turn clock. She made the really heads-up play of not actually cracking the clue, recognizing that the card matters a lot less than the mana advantage she'd get here. So she's opted to keep that to allow the Briarbridge Tracker to remain a 4/3. And yeah, had she drawn a land, she'd have been able to present lethal over 2 turns while still holding up several counterspells. As it stands, it might be lethal over a few more turns instead, but still a huge mana advantage and advantage in terms of just presenting a lot of damage. So definitely a good spot for Caroline.
And we'll see. Jana down to 10. Caroline still at 20. Behold the Multiverse was the draw here for Jana. So thinking about playing this Frost, Boil, Snarl, and that will be the play. Not quite enough to activate that Hall of Storm Giants. So just going to pass the turn back over to Caroline, who had drawn Red and 7 last turn, but too expensive to deploy at that time. Memory Deluge instead will be the play here at the end of Jana's turn. So we get to look at quite a few cards. We'll see if Jana is going to answer this. And it looks like she will with one of those Galvanic Iterations. No?
Yeah,
Perhaps?
So it's tempting in this spot to go for something like Galvanic Iteration plus Divide by Zero, knowing there's nothing like Alrund's Epiphany to punish Jana from Caroline's spot, but it doesn't really solve the problem that Caroline still is going to have 5 cards in hand, has a bunch of counter spells, has 2 extra mana, and is again going to keep putting Jana further and further behind. Well, Jana just doesn't have answers to those cheap threats.
Yeah, it looks like even with the double learn, the Teaching of the Archaics would do nothing because Jana has more cards in hand, and Mascot Exhibition would require Jana to totally tap out. So probably not the best. Maybe spinning wheels a little bit here on Jana's side. We see Hall of Storm Giants be the draw on Caroline's side. Briarbridge Tracker going to come right back down onto the battlefield. Let's make another clue. And now 2 clues for Briarbridge off of the Briarbridge Tracker, allowing Caroline to crack one of them and still maintain the +2/+0 benefit as well.
Yep.
Now, do you get in here with these creepers? Or
I think it's definitely tempting to get in with 1 creeper. I don't think Caroline ever should get in with 2 creepers in this spot, because getting in with 1 creeper still lets her present lethal, and most importantly, it still lets her leave up double counterspell with Disdainful Stroke plus Decisive Denial. So definitely not an ideal spot for Jana to be in.
And we see Field of Ruin, the draw on the side of Jana. And we can't forget, Caroline does have a Hall of Storm Giants as well with the mana able to activate it. So quite a few options. We'll see all runs Epiphany. Just Jana looks like gonna fire it off right here. Going for it. All runs Epiphany.
Yeah, in this spot, Jana just doesn't have any choice. She's dead if Caroline untaps, but there's also no world Caroline's 14 counterspell deck does not have a counterspell in hand in this spot.
It's more of a matter of which one than if she has one. So that will be game number 2 going to Caroline the Mighty Linguine. So we move on to a game 3 between these two. Battling from Division 4, we've got Caroline Mighty Linguine on Team Vampire and Jana Amari on Team Werewolf. So we see Jana redoing some of the sideboarding here, kind of deciding exactly how many multiverse, Behold the Multiverse she wants in her deck, shaving here and there. There's a difference between being on the play and the draw. Are there any changes you would think about making here?
I definitely consider the smoldering eggs in the matchup, which is something Jana hasn't brought in. It's close because there definitely are answers to them with the decisive denial, so it's not cut and dry. But given the amount of counterspells Jana's seen out of Caroline, she kind of needs something to get under them, and expensive threats like Lear and Cyclone Summoner probably aren't going to cut it.
Well, all right, we will move on to game number 3 here. We got Jana on the play. Was Jana on the play in game? Has this gone play draw for us so far? So
yes, I believe
it
so.
has. So we see Jana keeping a 2-land hand, but Expressive Iteration, very good at fixing that, as well as Jawari Disruption is definitely a decent land in a pinch. So
yep. And one of the things this Izzet deck gets to do that makes it so strong is because of the spell lands with Jawari Disruption, Shadow Skull Smashing, Spikefield has it, at least some of which will have decks in any given matchup. The Izzet deck gets to run often as many as 29, almost 30 lands sometimes. And that, since it's a deck that really wants to hit its land drops, it's remarkably good at making sure that, well, it just always hits its land drops. And yep, it's really good in making sure that it doesn't miss land drops because half of its spells are also lands.
yes, we'll see. Caroline allowing this Expressive Iteration to happen with the Test of Talents and the Decisive Denial both in hand, but passing the turn back, land number 3 in the battlefield, and a quick turn of the pass back because Divide by 0 doesn't do anything on a battlefield with no permanence. So just a land and another pass from Jana, and no 4th land here on Caroline's side. That can't feel very good.
No, it's not ideal, though Jana also has a hand that does not very much to punish this empty board. So Caroline has a turn or two at least to try and find something here.
Yes. Caroline considering discarding the Chariot, but then ultimately deciding to discard the Ren and 7. You think that's because of mana value, or?
Yeah, I'm pretty certain it's because of mana value. Even if Caroline does get to 7 lands, being able to actually get to 5 lands, being able to actually tap out for N7 at that point seems very risky against the Nalrun's Epiphany deck, whereas Chariot could maybe come down the next turn or two and still be safe.
We'll see Lear be the play here. I'm going to divide by 0 that right back to Jana's hand and get an Environmental Sciences to hopefully shore up this mana problem that Caroline has been having. So Environmental Sciences cast, putting a forest in hand. So 4th land on the battlefield for Caroline now, and Jana gonna retry Lear, it looks like. That would be the play here. Yeah.
There's not a huge amount in Jana's graveyard to reward that Lear, but it's better than just doing nothing, which is what this handful of Galvanic Iterations is going to have Jana do otherwise. And at the very least, it does a good job turning off all Caroline's counterspell because that important line of text on Leo which says spells can't be countered.
It does. Those decisive denials may end up being fights for Lear instead. if Caroline is able to get these chariots in play, but it looks like maybe considering holding off and casting Memory Deluge instead.
Yeah, I think what it all comes down to in this bout is whether Caroline calls Jana's bluff, because Jana's representing counter spells here, right? And Caroline or interaction, not representing counter spells, is representing having a really scary threat if Caroline taps out. So that's kind of forcing Caroline to pass and represent maybe having a divide by zero for an Alrund's Epiphany. But Jana doesn't actually have threats, so if Caroline had just gone for Memory Deluge to hit lands there, she might have been in fine shape.
Yeah, and I mean, nothing's getting countered right now anyway. So Frostboil Snarl comes down, and I mean, Lear is still can be a beater as a 3/4. Caroline taking the hit, going down to 19, and will end of turn Memory Deluge here. Is it worth a divide by zero?
Likely in this spot. It just hopefully prevents Caroline from getting more lands, which is what Jana wants. And Jana would be discarding the hand size anyway. Though there is a temptation to try and resolve a windfall here as well. Unfortunately for Jana, that Frostbolt's now entered tapped. Had it entered untapped, a Galvanic Iteration plus an Unexpected Windfall to further develop her mana advantage would have been really, really strong.
And it looks like that will be the deal. Jana will let that resolve. Spikefield Hazard will be discarded too. So Spikefield Hazard can still be cast off of Lear, but but Caroline will be able to resolve that Memory Deluge and is going to deploy Briarbridge Tracker here, making a clue. So a 4/3 sizing up nicely against Lear as the 3/4. Burning Hands. Thinking about it, making sure to tap that Field of Ruin first. Burning Hands going to attempt to take care of the Briarbridge Tracker. And the question is, does Caroline fight in response here?
I believe she has to. I don't think she's going to get another opportunity, and the decisive denials have no text against Lear anyway. But it's not going to work out particularly well with that divide by zero in Jana's hand.
Yes, and we will see that happen. So Caroline will attempt the decisive denial, but divide by zero. Follow up here from Jana, going to decide to bounce the Briarbridge Tracker back to hand and learning, getting a mascot exhibition and another unexpected windfall. And it seems that Jana is off to the races here.
Yeah, with 8 mana here and multiple iterations and windfalls in hand, Jana's representing it at turn, making as many as 6 treasures by casting Galvanic Iterations into Unexpected Windfall. And with all the land drops she's missed, I don't think Caroline's going to be able to keep up with that level of mana advantage.
Yes, and oh boy. Yeah, so I'm looking at Caroline's hand right now, and I just see counterspell, counterspell, and I'm like, oh no. This can't feel that good. Briarbridge Tracker coming back down. Not even going to bother trying to divide by zero it or anything. Saying, you know what? You can have your 4/3. You can have your clue. That's totally fine. And not much else that Caroline can do here. So Galvanic Iteration at the end of turn. Presumably going to make 1,000,000 treasures from Unexpected Windfall.
Yeah, though the downside of that is that does leave Caroline a window to decisive denial and fight this Leia, while Jana doesn't have mana up to. Oh, there's still the Burning Hands in her discard pile, right? Never mind.
So Burning Hands, it's hard to keep track when there's so many cards. There weren't that many cards in the graveyard like 2 turns ago, I swear. But but Burning Hands will end up taking care of that Briarbridge Tracker. And so Jana will draw a bunch of cards, make a bunch of treasures, just a wealth of resources. Caroline down to 13 with that attack. Galvanic Iteration here. And there is an Epiphany hiding in the hand, I believe.
I don't think there is. I don't think any of those 40-ish cards are Epiphanies.
It's a Cyclone Summoner. I saw like the blue big costed thing, but it's just a mascot exhibition to make 6 creatures onto the battlefield and present more than lethal from Jana's side. We'll see if Caroline has any outs here.
Yeah, in this spot, Caroline, Jana has any number of different ways she can win. There's not really much Caroline could have with Jana having, 6 more mana than her?
Yeah, that's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah, Caroline getting caught on mana early seemed to, unfortunately, dictate the way this match was going to run. Demon Bolt will be the weapon of choice to try to take care of that Briarbridge tracker, and nothing can be countered. Caroline is going to divide by 0 on the tracker to bounce it back to hand and get a mascot exhibition, but Jana is coming across for a lot more than 13, and Jana will take this game and this match down 2 games to 1. Good games to both of our competitors. Wow. This is showing for Izzet this week, wasn't it? It was just like, I feel like it was the Izzet showcase. I was like, it's fine. They're not going to win every match, are they?
Well, they didn't win the first one, but...
That's true. I mean, only a 75% win rate.
I'm glad Crimson Vow is coming around this week to hopefully shake up the metagame a little bit.
Oh, I am too. I'm definitely looking forward to testing out and trying out. Like I said, I was very excited for Thalia, Chandra Just to Kill. Everybody's excited about that card. What is there a card in particular you're looking forward to playing?
So I might be the villain in this story, but I'm looking forward to playing with Hullbreaker Horror, because what sounds better than casting a bunch of Windfalls, making a bunch of mana, when you can do that and also be bouncing your opponent's entire board and all their spells.
Well, at least you're not trying to figure out how to make the Alchemist's thing work, the other extra turn. Like, I don't even think that card's very good.
Yeah.
But I feel like the fact that they printed it is just like the audacity. All right.
Yeah.
It's like you're trying to trick me. I don't think it's actually going to end up being anything, but at the same time, I'm a little scared that it might be. So when you said you were going to be the villain, I was sure that was going to be your card. So.
No, I agree with you on that card not being too playable. I mean, even in today's matchups, we saw 3 of the 4 Izzet decks only running 3 Elrond's Epiphanies. They're not even going to run the 4th Epiphany, so they're definitely not going to run copies 5 through 8, because ultimately, too many 7-cost spells, it turns out, does have downsides.
You mean I have to play 2-drops? What is this, right? So, luckily, they have the best 2-drop in the format in Expressive Iteration, but that's for another time. Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. Again, I want to give a big thanks to the Energy Series for making this possible. No Rage Gaming. Make sure you follow them on Twitter at NRG Series. We are sponsored by Wizards of the Coast. They are phenomenal. They've supported us. We've got our 500 gems every week to our for every match win. Our competitors get 500 gems, so that's pretty sweet. And they're also sending our champion to the next set championship. And a huge thank you again to Channel Fireball as well for the Channel Fireball Pro subscriptions for our top 8 and for their help in promoting our awesome league here. If you aren't following us yet, well, make sure first off that you're following us here on Twitch. Twitch.tv/VMLMTG. We're great. We're on every Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Make sure you follow us on here. Follow us on Twitter at VMLMTG and catch up on everything that's going on in the VML standings and everything at VMLMTG.com. Again, thanks to our excellent admin team, all of our players, our viewers, all of you at home, our phenomenal producer, Phoebe, behind the scenes, making all this magic possible because she is the best. And a big thanks to my wonderful co-caster on her first official gig here as a permanent fixture here in the VML production team. So happy to have you. So glad to work with you, Arya. You are phenomenal. So Anything you'd like to say before we sign off?
Thank you so much for casting with me. It was a pleasure, as always.
You are wonderful. I hope you all have an excellent night, and we will see you next week.